performance than that, and this bill will deliver a much better regime.
Dr. David Clark.
Mr. Speaker, I'm always disappointed not to hear more from that member, but perhaps he feels that there is not much more worth talking about in this bill, and embarrassed he might be, because this is a bill that once again sees small businesses being squeezed. As Labour's small business spokesperson, I feel strongly about the OITOs being undermined through the de facto privatisation of industry training that takes place in this bill. And as many others of those who have contributed this evening have noted, there was virtually no support for this proposal from submitters to the Select Committee. And we believe it has the potential to damage the provision of quality industry training in New Zealand. This is a government that is out of touch. It is looking out for a few at the top. It is arrogant. And Mr. Hayes yells across the House, Tui, he's not listening. This is exactly illustrative of the point we are making. Dismissive, cursory, one-liners, no longer engaged with what's going on in real New Zealand. That member is willing to dismiss the arguments, willing to dismiss the submitters and the views of the submitters I was just representing with a quick one-liner. An economic recovery in New Zealand should not only benefit the few, it needs to benefit all of New Zealand. And industry training, with its skills leadership, provides a support to those small business people that risk their shirt every day, that struggle out there to make ends meet, that want to pay their workers a living wage but are squeezed by the bigger players in town who have scale, often who have fancy tax arrangements to avoid paying their fair share, and the ordinary Kiwis out there who struggle day after day after day after day, putting their mortgages on the line to fund their small businesses, find another plank of support is ripped out from under them with this bill. Direct funding will work for large businesses who are not interested in looking after the few employees they've got, who can rip out there, buy the cheapest CD packaged course from a non-accredited agency, not concerned about skills leadership. But ITOs in their existing form have a concern for their own reputations, they have a passion for their industry, they are invested in their industry, and they have a background that leads them to be strong providers. Now, there has been a big restructuring in the sector, and no one from this side of the House that I have heard has argued strongly against that. That restructuring is making a real difference to the performance of the sector, the ITO sector, and the services that are on offer. But putting in place a system that will undermine these changes is short-sighted and would likely, in my view, erode the growing confidence of businesses in ITOs. When every man and their dog and every woman and their cat can go out, produce a CD and just market it as a course or skills training, that will appeal to the lowest common denominator. That will appeal to those group of employers who are not particularly concerned about skills development in their workforce, but more concerned about getting wealthy off the back of cheap labour, and those who wish to support their workers, who wish to strengthen their skills, who wish to grow value businesses, moving along the chain from volume to value. Those people will struggle because the ITOs, the quality ITOs, will be undermined by this new structure. So the skills leadership function being removed as a purpose from the ITOs is something that we strongly oppose on this side of the House. Now, no one will be responsible for skills leadership in the sector. We learned that in this bill now, everyone, all at once, is somehow responsible. Well, if I learnt one thing during my time at the Treasury, it's clear lines of accountability matter. Clear lines of accountability. To be able to go back and say this person ultimately is responsible for that happening is an incredibly important management principle. Saying everybody is responsible for making it happen devolves it down so no one takes responsibility. And as my colleague Dr. Megan Woods pointed out, with no funding there as well, once again another important principle I learned at the Treasury, or had reinforced there, is that incentives matter. And if there is no funding, there is no incentive to develop quality training, and that is not good for industry. It's not good for future skill needs of our people. It's not good for the small businesses that rely on the ITOs. It's not good for our ability as a nation to be flexible on our feet, to scale up, to meet needs. If I think of the marine sector, where the ITO meets, if you can excuse the pun, these bits of business that come in waves. Sometimes there are a whole lot of ships that need building, sometimes there are few, and that ITO knows how to scale up, knows how to scale down, is concerned with quality provision and meeting the needs of a high-value industry. Now, if we have players that fly by night that undermine those ITOs that are concerned about quality provision, we lose them as a country. Once they're gone, they're gone. And then we have people with uncertain jobs who are there responding to the incentives to make a buck, to provide the provision that ticks the box for the employer, and sadly that undermines that skills leadership function that has been developing so strongly in recent years, and particularly through the changes that have been brought upon through the restructuring, which no one on this side of the House, as I've said, has opposed. The shortage of skilled tradespeople in New Zealand is a serious concern that National has exacerbated by failing to invest in apprenticeships and industry training. This is not a new phenomenon, and people watching at home should know that from 2009 to January 2013 there was a 20% drop in the number of modern apprentices and a 37% drop in the number of industry trainees. That is a very, very sad record for this government. Labor is committed to ensuring New Zealand has the skilled workforce it needs. Labor wants New Zealanders to have jobs and opportunities, and to ensure that the government cannot sit on its hands, as this national government has done and continues to do. Mr. Speaker, after coming into office, National oversaw that loss of thousands of apprenticeship positions, and by the time, a shameful loss to oversee, and by the time they finally woke up, the skill deficit had been created. Now we see further steps to undermine the ITO sector, to undermine that skills leadership function, and potentially lead to higher costs for small businesses over time as you lose that regular training and you have to invest heavily from time to time. We've got the privatisation in the sector, and once again we're seeing that this economic recovery that's being talked about is only going to benefit a very few at the top. Labor stands for opportunity for all New Zealanders. We support skills training. The OECD is very clear. The OECD is very clear in its work on economic development that the best way to raise GDP growth in a country is to start with low-skilled workers in the regions. The model of hubbing, of bringing together the highest skills in the big cities has been pushed over many, many years, and it has its merits. There is agglomeration, there are benefits in that way of doing things, but the OECD has produced research that says actually now the low-hanging fruit is not having one or two more highly skilled people in those biggest centres, but it's actually about raising the skills of the lowest skilled workers in the regions. That's where 60% of our workforce is already, and raising those skills make the biggest contribution to GDP improvements. And so it's logical that ITOs should be strengthened, not undermined, as this bill is suggesting. That is the way to make sure that the benefits of any economic recovery are shared fairly, so that the gap between rich and poor doesn't continue to grow, and we know that it is at the highest level it has been in recorded New Zealand history. This is a shameful record of this government, as the gap between rich and poor continues to grow and they do nothing about it. And we know so much of it goes back to those 2010 tax cuts, where those at the top got 40% of the value of the tax cuts, the top 10%, and those bottom 20% of New Zealand earners got just 2% of the value of the tax cuts, and of course that was swallowed up in GST. Now that gap between rich and poor could be addressed by good policy on the ITOs, ensuring that skills training is available to everybody, ensuring that evidence-based evidence-based learning was followed, and that the benefits of those ITOs that have contributed so much is built upon rather than undermined through a de facto privatisation of the industry training sector. Mr. Speaker.
Claudette Howiti.
I support this bill.
Members, this debate is concluded. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Ayes have it. Party votes called for. Ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
3 votes in favour.
Mana.
1 vote opposed.
ACT New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan.
Members, the ayes are 64, the noes are 56. The motion is agreed to.
And Apprenticeships Amendment Bill, second reading.
This bill is set down for committee stage next sitting day. Members, the House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow. Good evening.